Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we dive into just how good the Eagles have been on the road this year. Redemption coming up for the Birds, maybe in the Meadowlands on Sunday, and our LOE3 three-player props presented by BetOnline that I'm riding with in Eagles Giants. All that and more on this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Friday edition of the show. I'm Louie DiBiase. You can find our podcast Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Make sure you also hit us up on Twitter at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. Eagles Giants this Sunday at 1 o'clock. It is the Battle of the Meadowlands, the first of two matchups with New York in the month of December. The Eagles 11-1 right now, not only trying to hold on to the one seed in the NFC, but just trying to keep a stranglehold on the NFC East division crown. And this is going to be a good game, another tough test. The New York Giants are a good team. I wouldn't say they're great. I would even say they're worse than their record shows, but they are very well coached. They are very opportunistic on defense. They're good late in games. Their quarterback, I don't respect really his ability to take over a game as a passer, but he can run the football. So, if the play breaks down, you have to keep your eyes on Daniel Jones. And on the road, this is definitely a tough challenge for the Eagles as they head back to the Meadowlands for the first time since last year's really tough matchup. One of Jalen Hurts' worst games as a starter. One of the games that I was already off the bandwagon of Jalen, and I was starting to jump off completely at that point. It was later on in the year, and it just looked like Jalen Hurts was never going to be able to become the passer that he is today. But that did, in fact, happen. And it really is crazy when you think back to, just how bad he was in the pocket against New York the last time he was in the Meadowlands versus now he heads back to the Meadowlands as an MVP candidate. And yes, he is on pace for nearly 900 rushing yards right now. He has 9 rushing touchdowns, still one of the best mobile quarterbacks in the NFL. But to see how good he is now as a passer within the numbers, coming off a performance against the Titans that, like I said, the last time he was in the Meadowlands, I would have gave you every cent I had in my bank account if it meant predicting that we would never get a performance from Jalen Hurts like he had against the Tennessee Titans. 380 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns, as well as a rushing touchdown to go up on it. And you look at, 68% completion percentage, and he's atop the league in 25-plus yard touchdowns and yards per attempt. He's second, pretty much ahead of everybody in every accuracy metric. At the same time, he's got the best touchdown to interception ratio. To see how, and we've talked about it pretty much every episode of Locked On Eagles in 2022. But again, it's just truly incredible to reflect back, take a look back where we were with Jalen the last time he was playing the Giants on the road versus right now. It's absolutely incredible. And head coach Nick Sirianni talked about it in his press conference today. He even said that they have a picture up in the NovaCare complex, and it's a famous picture of Jalen Hurts, kind of kneeling down and super disappointed, and Jordan Mailata has his hand on his back. And it was right after Jalen Reagor last year had dropped that game-winning touchdown, because although Hurts was awful throughout that entire game, right, the Giants did not respect his ability to pass, right? They blitzed him early and often on first and second down. They got into these third and long situations, and then they called off the dogs, and Hurts couldn't figure it out with his arm. But at the same time, they had a chance at the end of the game. Jalen Hurts puts it on Jalen Reagor, and he simply just dropped the football. That picture of Hurts kneeling, or kind of just, keeled over, crouched over after that play in disappointment, is up on the wall. And Sirianni kind of just showed or explained, how that moment was a really good teaching moment. Number one, of how to be a great teammate. Jordan Mailata is like, that's my quarterback. I'm going to stand next to him through the good and through the bad. And that's definitely what makes or breaks teams, especially with a young core. But also, I love that he used that picture as motivation to show how far they've come since then, and how it's constant motivation to never feel the way they did in that football game. And I love those kind of moments in sports when it turns a team into a better version of themselves compared to, you see these moments all the time in sports. Like, The Super Bowl before the Eagles won it all, Patriots, Falcons, right? The Falcons blow that, 28-3 lead, and they never got back. They were never the same again. The Atlanta Falcons were a shell of who they once were, and so was Matt Ryan coming off that MVP season. It just felt like they could never get over the ghost of that moment, that collapse in the Super Bowl. And it's the same, honestly, 2 years before that, Seahawks Patriots in the Super Bowl, right? Russell Wilson on the goal line. You're about to repeat as Super Bowl champions. He throws the interception to Malcolm Butler, and New England wins it all. It felt like Seattle was never the same, even though they still had the Legion of Boom, and Marshawn Lynch didn't leave after that season, and Russell Wilson was still there. The core was still intact for about 3 more years. They never felt the same. They couldn't get over that ghost. But it's cool when, and of course, this is to a way less important degree, Eagles Giants in a regular season game of 2021 when the Eagles aren't title contenders anyway. But, it's that same kind of moment late in a game. You have an opportunity to pull off the win, and a drop. Sometimes that's harder than just getting blown out or a missed field goal, something like that. When the ball is literally in your first round pick's hands and he just drops it, it's tough to get over those moments at times. So it's cool to see when the ghost of that moment makes you better rather than makes you worse. And you can definitely tell that was a wake-up moment for Jalen and for this entire Eagles team. I mean, they ran the table at the end to make the playoffs last year, and now look at who he is as a quarterback. And I think those were great learning experiences for Hurts. He's not the player that was stubborn and said, forget that game. He said, no, let's learn from that game. And I think Nick Sirianni is using that same message, and it's why the picture is up on the wall. And, people can call Nick Sirianni cheesy until they're blue in the face. You can make fun of his flower comments last year. And, I saw a lot of Colts fans and just NFL people in general on Twitter a couple weeks ago against the Colts, kind of saying how cheesy and overdramatic it was that Nick Sirianni, after a 17-16 win, says that, this was for Frank Reich. But I'll tell you what, I love it. I really embrace Sirianni's coaching style. He really knows how to, motivate a young team, how to teach, how to use passion. It just feels like he always has the right message. And I think that's really important. And that's the one difference between, I think, him and like Doug Peterson and Andy Reid. They're all very great offensive minds, game planners, talent developers, player-friendly coaches that allow their players to dictate the culture and to be leaders. And they're not like, they fit their scheme around what their players do best rather than vice versa, aka Chip Kelly. But one thing I think that Nick Sirianni maybe does better than Doug and Andy is he's more of a teacher and a leader in a way. You know what I mean? Like he feels more like you almost a player. And I think these messages that he uses really does resonate with this team. Some teams definitely tune out their coach, and sometimes the message doesn't get through no matter how hard they try, and messages get stale. But I feel like Nick Sirianni is constantly finding new creative ways to teach this team. And I think that moment against the Giants last year is one of those teaching moments. And it has definitely made this team so much better. I mean, they are a completely different team this year compared to last year. I remember that game ending, and I'm like, Jalen just doesn't have it. It sucked having that feeling of this defense just did not respect his ability within the pocket. And I don't know if you can ever be a franchise quarterback if a defense feels that way about you. Well, that's not the case now. The New York Giants cannot go into this game with the same strategy, or Jalen is going to make them pay 100%. But they've come a long way, and this is going to be a big challenge on Sunday against the New York Giants. Coming up next, guys, right here on Locked On Eagles, they're going on the road. Philadelphia has a 3-game road trip coming up over these next 3 weeks. And the Eagles, it's kind of gone under the radar how good they've been on the road. I want to get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's episode of Locked On Eagles is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual. So when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, 100% online. I've been using therapy now for 2 years. It has been an incredible, life-changing experience. It is totally changed how I go about crisis and how I deal with people and myself and just so many different situations. And the fact that it's 100% online makes it, a lot more comfortable for you. Everybody deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. All the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. Learn more at BetterHelp.com and save 10% off your first month with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's BetterHelp.com/LOCKEDON to get 10% off your first month of online therapy. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, make sure your second listen is the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local expert and insight only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your shows. The Philadelphia Eagles have been incredible basically at everything in 2022, right? I mean, it is almost impossible to keep up with how many positive stats are being thrown out there every single day about every player on this team. Both units, the Eagles are first in this category. They're first in this. The Eagles are the first team since 19-something to do this, right? Your head is spinning, and, there's so many stats to keep up with, but the moral of the story is they are a historically good regular season team in 2022. I made the case on Wednesday, this is the most talented team in Eagles history, but regardless of what happens in the playoffs, if they keep this up for the remaining 5 weeks of the season, they're going to go down as one of the most efficient teams in NFL history within a regular season. So, they've pretty much done everything there is to do. They're atop every possible metric. They've won every kind of way. They've beaten good teams. Like I said, so many players on this team are atop the league in their own positions, and so certain things kind of blend in, right? Because there's so much to talk about. And one thing that kind of has gone under the radar, and it kind of goes without saying, it's almost assumed, because they are 11-1, is their road record. I mean, they're obviously, because there's only one loss, and we know it was at home on Monday night a month ago against Washington, we know that they are undefeated on the road this year. And it's kind of, I feel like, gone under the radar because, like I said, there's so many positive things to talk about. And because you've only lost one game, it's just an assumption. So you're not really talking about the home record versus the away because they're winning every game no matter what. But at the same time, you do have to talk about how impressive that is. Despite being 11-1, the fact that you are undefeated in any season heading into December on the road is extremely challenging to do. I mean, Sirianni was actually talking about this today, how, there's tough situations in every single game on the home front, on the road, there's streaks and there's different changes in momentum, turnovers happen and crazy plays, penalties, maybe missed calls, everything like that. But he mentioned how it's a little heightened and a little more intense on the road. You feel like it happens a little more when you travel to somebody else's stadium. And I totally agree with that. And the Eagles have seen that firsthand this year. I mean, they've won some incredibly tight games on the road in really hard environments. And I don't think it should be, kind of unsaid how impressive that is. I mean, you look at the games they've played, like week 1 against the Detroit Lions. I mean, the Lions are surging back in the second half. You had built up a multi-score lead heading into the second half, and Detroit erases that. And, it's an intense crowd. It's the season opener. A lot of expectations heading into the year. Fourth down, right? You got to convert that play on the QB sneak to put the game on ice and just make sure that the Lions don't fully come back. And you look at that game against Arizona, right? You have to march down, kick the game-winning field goal, and then stop Arizona from doing the exact same thing against, a really mobile quarterback in Kyler Murray with a lot of talent on that offense, another tough environment heading across the country. I mean, you look at 3 weeks ago against the Indianapolis Colts, under 2 minutes to go, you don't have Dallas Goedert, you're trailing in the game. You have to go, and you can't kick a field goal to win the game. You got to score a touchdown. So on the road with under 2 minutes to go, you got to go score a touchdown. And the Eagles won every single one of those games. Those were all very tough environments, close game situations. Some of them you're losing. Some of them you need an offensive play. Some of them you need a defensive play. And no matter what the games have called for on the road this year, the Eagles have stepped up. And again, that's assumed because they are 11-1. So we have not talked at all this year about their performance on the road, because we just have talked about their overall performance, because no matter what the situation is, they just keep winning games. But again, we have to, I feel like, give attention to how impressive this really is. And I think it's very important that they're doing that on the road, because I feel like road environments are very similar to playoff environments. Like, even if you get the 1 seed this year and the playoffs in the NFC runs through Lincoln Financial Field, again, a lot of the situations that present themselves on the road, they happen at that same intensity level in the playoffs, even if you are at home. And if you make it to the Super Bowl, like, that is not your stadium. And maybe the Eagles don't get the 1 seed. I don't know. Maybe they'd have to go on the road in an NFC championship game. You need to be able to overcome and not get overwhelmed by those intense situations, intense environments, especially at that kind of level, like the playoffs. In this team, I have no doubt that if that presents itself in January, that they're going to be able to overcome it, thrive, and get a win. They really do have a playoff DNA. And it's not just because of the veterans that have won a Super Bowl. It's the young, mature players too that know how to prepare. They've seen big games as well in the SEC. You know, Jalen Hurts went to the college football playoff all 4 years of college. You know, Jordan Davis at Georgia won a national championship. Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown played in the SEC. Landon Dickerson up front. You know, all of these players, regardless of their background, it feels like has this makeup. And it's why I'm just so confident that they're not going to be like, you know, some of those letdown number 1 seeds in the past. You know, you look at the 2019 Baltimore Ravens, they were as dominant as the Eagles are this year in that regular season, with Lamar Jackson winning MVP. And then they lose in the divisional round. They didn't even play a game because they got the bye week, and they lose to Tennessee. Speaking of Tennessee, I mean, talk about a letdown number 1 seed. How about the 2021 Tennessee Titans? I mean, they were a huge letdown too. I have no doubt that that is not going to be this Eagles team if they get the number 1 seed, and that's a huge part of it. And I think them being undefeated on the road deserves a little more credit and a little more coverage. And, you know, it's another tough environment on Sunday against a division opponent that's fighting for a playoff spot. I mean, this is going to be probably the toughest road environment you've faced all year. But I have no doubt this team is just going to handle it like they do any other situation. It's just like nothing phases this team. You know, I talked about how I just mentioned how road environments are more intense. And when the games are close on the road, it's even more intense. Everything's heightened. And, you know, that's how it is in the playoffs too. But this Eagles team doesn't read into anything like that. And that's why they thrive, because to them, that's not the situation. They just tune that out. They say, what do we got to go do? We're going to prepare. Our preparation is never going to change. Our execution, we're going to go out there, and regardless, we're going to just do what we do. And they just don't get rattled, and they don't let those outside factors, or, you know, Jalen Hurts likes to call it the rat poison. They just don't let that kind of stuff affect them. So that's why I feel so confident about this team versus, you know, past playoff contenders and past 1 seeds that were letdowns. I don't think that's going to be this team. We'll see what happens Sunday. It's going to be, like I said, another tough environment in New Jersey against the New York Giants, because they're fighting for a playoff spot, and this is going to be a big one for sure. I'm going to keep talking about that game, though, coming up next, because we have LOE 3 presented by BetOnline. Going to get into 3 player prop bets I have for you in Eagles Giants. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's show is presented by Prize Picks Daily Fantasy. So here's how Prize Picks works. I absolutely love it. I won some big money last week because of Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they're going to score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, going up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projection available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport you watch. This includes the NFL, of course, college football, the NBA, MLB, NHL, the PGA Tour. I mean, men's and women's college basketball, if you're a soccer guy, WNBA, esports, I mean, NASCAR, boxing, MMA, even cricket, you name it. It's all available at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, I love to say it's for the degenerates. And I know there's a lot of you out there. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, safe and fast withdrawals as well. Currently operational in over 30 states in Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a deposit match of 100% up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks is going to give you $100. If you deposit $50, they're going to give you $50. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm Louie DiBiase, wrapping up another week of shows. Eagles-Giants this Sunday in the Meadowlands. Going to be a tough game for the 11-1 Birds. It's the first matchup this month against the Giants. They have two of them. Definitely got to keep up that division record as they try to, keep up and hold on to first place in this division and hopefully get home field advantage with that number one seed in the NFC. I'm also going to try to keep up my end of the bargain and stay hot with my bets in these Eagles games. So let's get into LOE3, presented by our official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is BetOnline. So as we do every Friday to wrap up the show, I've got 3 player props for you, 3 player props to bet on in Eagles-Giants. I'm on absolute fire. Gino and I almost ran the table last week against the Titans. We went 5-1. The last bet that we did not get, Gino hit. He hammered A.J. Brown. It was at least 120 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, and an Eagles win. He nearly hit that parlay. He missed by 1 yard because A.J. Brown had 119 yards, 1 touchdown, and an Eagles win. So we went 5-1, but hey, not bad in the world of betting, right? So I have 3 more bets for you, though, today. Let's get into those, presented by BetOnline. So I'm going to start with my head-to-head matchup of the week, and this one is gross. But this, again, is for the degenerates out there. This is an obscure bet that I'm going to try to win you some money. The odds are plus 172, and we like to do a head-to-head matchup every week. Last week, we both hit our head-to-heads. I had Quez Watkins to have more receiving yards than Nick Westbrook, Akane, and then Gino had more passing yards for Jalen Hurts over Ryan Tannehill. This week, my head-to-head, it's Jack Stoll versus Daniel Bellinger, the battle of the obscure tight ends. I have Jack Stoll to have more receiving yards than Daniel Bellinger. Again, those odds are plus 172. Jack Stoll coming off a career day on Sunday against the Titans. 3 catches for 41 yards. He made 2 really nice grabs. They were low throws from Hurts over the middle of the field. Stoll goes down and brings them in. He also had a 23-yard reception, which was a career high. Stoll, to be honest, look, he only has 8 catches this year for 97 yards. He's still a block-first tight end like he was in 2021. But I will say, and Nick Sirianni has mentioned before, that Jalen Hurts trusts Stoll if he has to throw it to him. Stoll's hands look definitely improved compared to last year. Like, he is definitely an improved receiver. And of course, they're not going to feature him in any way like they do Dallas Goedert when he's in the lineup. But I feel like, Bellinger, this is a bold pick because he's had at least 5 catches in 2 of the last 3 games. But at the same time, Bellinger only has 172 yards this year. He's had some, down games too. And, I don't trust Daniel Jones to throw the football against the number 1 pass defense in the league. So maybe that means Bellinger is his safety blanket. But I got to go bold with one of my picks here. And I think Stoll's going to maybe carry on from that career day last week, 41 receiving yards. Bellinger only had 24. So this is definitely a tougher bet, and it's the bolder one, and it's definitely obscure. But I'm going to bet on Jack Stoll this week. I felt like I should spice it up, we're all going to bet on Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, but how about a Jack Stoll bet? If you want to go a little bold and get a little more bang for your buck this Sunday, Jack Stoll versus Daniel Bellinger is my head-to-head that you can bet on at BetOnline. So that is one of my bets. I have got 2 more for you, and it's a Miles Sanders bet first. Miles Sanders, the over on 1.5 receptions. That's a plus 134 odd bet. Miles Sanders, not the receiving back he was his rookie year in 2019. He hasn't been that guy since. And it's crazy because he was their best deep threat when Deshaun Jackson went down. And at the end of the year when they won the division, he was, outside of course, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, he was their other explosive playmaker in the air. Like, Carson Wentz relied a lot on checking it down to Sanders and letting him go make plays in space. Sanders is having a career year on the ground this year, but, he still doesn't catch the football a lot or make those explosive plays through the air. But I'm going to take the over on 1.5 receptions, plus 134 odds. He had 2 catches last week. He had 3 receptions the week before that against Green Bay. So the yards are not there anymore with him. But I'll say I'll take the over on receptions. I think with Dallas Goedert still out an extra week, I think Hurts has been, adding an extra target here and there to Sanders as a check down. Dallas Goedert has been Jalen's, security blanket this year. And, Devontae Smith and Quez Watkins are getting more looks, and maybe Jack Stoll is too. And Hurts is running the ball more, but you've also seen a little more of an uptick in Sanders' checkdowns. So I'm going to hit the over on 1.5 receptions. He would have hit that bet the last 2 weeks. It is tough, though, because 6 of the previous 8 games before that, he only had 1 catch or no catches at all. But I'm going to ride with Miles Sanders over 1.5 receptions against the Giants. And then my third bet, it's a defensive bet. This is the first time all year I've made a bet on defense. I'm going to take the over on Hassan Reddick at 1 or a half a sack. I was going to say 1/2 sack, but you know what I mean. A half a sack, minus 136 odds there for that bet. Hassan Reddick is on fire, and I just want to keep riding that bet for sure. Reddick has had at least a half a sack in 4 straight games and in 5 of the last 6 games. He has been as advertised. The Eagles have had some incredible additions in 2022. Howie Roseman should win Executive of the Year, and I think he's got that in the bag. And, A.J. Brown was the best move, trading for him, trading for the interception leader, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, drafting Jordan Davis was huge, signing James Bradbury was big. He's the best corner maybe in football this year or behind Darius Slay. But I'll still say Hassan Reddick was the best free agent signing the Eagles made, and it was the first one. I mean, he is as advertised. He's exactly what he was last year in Carolina and what he was the year before in Arizona. He is one of the most dominant young pass rushers in football. I say he keeps up the hot streak. He has been getting to the quarterback a lot lately. I think he keeps it going against the Giants. I'm going to take the over on Hassan Reddick at a half sack in the Meadowlands. All right, Eagles fans, that's going to do it for this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. You can find us Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter as well, at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase, LOE. And once again, thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your shows. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go, Birds.